Welcome one and all to episode 5 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast with Nick and Blaze. This week we'll talk about the rundown of round 2, all the highs and lows, all the wins and losses, all the injuries, and the MRO stuff. We'll touch on round 3 and maybe some highlights that are coming up for next week during the Easter weekend. And maybe we'll talk about the rising star. Who knows? It might come up in conversation. So,
it could.
Let's move on. How you doing, Mr. Psyrick?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, it's sort of a fever dream of footy. I wasn't feeling that well on the weekend, so it's like I watched a bit of it, but it was all a bit in and out of my brain.
No,
so
I think this week
nice
I actually did
sitting
watch
down.
more than you.
Probably, I only watched 3 full matches and parts of others. So
I watched
yeah,
I watched Thursday night's game. I watched a bit of Friday nights. I think I had one of the Saturday games on at some point. I can't remember which one. And then obviously I went to Richmond Port at the MCG and I caught the second half of West Coast GWS. So
Yeah.
maybe I have watched more than you.
Yeah, probably, which is amazing, especially on a weekend I haven't actually gone out. So yeah.
For YouTube viewers, you might notice that I've added our tips at the top of the screen. He's beating me by 1 point, and that's because I have too much faith in Richmond right now.
It's been sad, tipping.
To be fair, I only got 1 correct on the opening round. That's what got me early.
I'm a bit, especially in the early rounds, I'm a bit traditionalist from last season. I tend to back teams until they really annoy me. I think we'll talk about it a bit later, but I think Collingwood might be a team I'm jumping off until they can prove that they're good again. And yeah, a few others that I'm a bit concerned about. Adelaide. And as I said, I probably have my faith back in Geelong. Maybe Fremantle. We'll see.
Well, speaking of Collingwood, do you want to start there? Thursday night's game?
Yes, and by you, I hope you mean you.
Yes, I do mean me, because I do have the notes for this.
Good.
So, Collingwood actually started off pretty strong in the first quarter. They kicked 3 major goals that had all the momentum control. Like, St Kilda just didn't look really into it at all. But it wasn't until Zane Cordy went down that the Saints decided, you know what? We're going to do something about this. And they kicked 5 in a row leading into the next quarter. And they just managed to keep that lead going.
By Zane Cordy, you mean Mason Wood?
Oh, yes, I did mean Mason Wood. I don't know why I have Zane Cordy written here.
Oh, good.
I'm going to change that in my notes whilst we're doing this. So it's going to throw me off. Isaiah Wanganeen-Milera, what a jet. He is so clean with it. He looked so good off of halfback. He had 32 touches at 81% efficiency. And his run and carry was just massive for them. Like, they was able to break packs and just burst through it.
And I think that should stamp St Kilda's style of play this season, because, as I said, him off halfback is generating that pace. You know, they've got speed on the wing. They can, attack a bit more out of the back, which is, like I said last week, a bit more what they're looking to do. And against the hard-working Collingwood midfield, definitely got some results there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I want to touch on Jack Steele, their captain, who pretty much led from the front as well, with 26 touches at 89% efficiency and 11 tackles, which was most in the game. So I think, their running carry game, their pressure game is really, really good at the moment. In some cases, it definitely slows down when it shouldn't. And, some teams will have that. Like, I know when Richmond was in that sort of game style, we did that a lot. But it'd be nice. Hopefully, it'll be good to see them just keep carrying with this momentum into the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, as style of play, you're going to get a fair few turnovers. You're going to, lose the ball a tiny bit. But as I said, with their backline the way it is, it's not hugely affecting them at the moment.
No, they've got a pretty solid core in all areas at the moment.
Again, Callum Wilkie's still carrying on from his Australian year. And again, Zane Cordy, he pretty much locked down Cox when he was up forward from what I saw.
Yeah. We'll ignore the fact that I had mentioned before that him being injured was meant to be Mason Wood.
Yes, yes, yeah. As I said, well, he's risen, like it's almost Easter weekend, so Zane Cordy rose from the ashes to lock down on Collingwood's defense, forward line, which
Speaking
again
of,
struggled.
what is going on with them at the moment? They're being beaten all over the ground in majority of the metrics. Over the weekend, they only had one tackle inside 50, like which is
Mm,
normally their
which is
key
very
area.
un
That
Collingwood.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
normally they're really really good in that statistic. Like that seems to be like they're over infringing as well. Their heart just doesn't seem to be in it at the moment.
Yeah, and it's like, and as I said, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it's like effort, effort, effort. Like, um, you have that highlight of, I don't know if you saw it, but when they were running back in defense, the little high five
Ah,
while
yeah.
St Kilda just blazed away. And it's one of those things where, it probably means nothing. Like,
No,
that
I think
action's
it
just,
means nothing, but media doesn't see it that
uh,
way.
hmm?
Media doesn't see it that
Yeah.
way.
No, I don't see it as anything, but it's like I'd just say it's like a minor brain fade sort of thing, It's the same as just, losing your man for a second or whatever. Like, you probably shouldn't do it in that passage of play, but, you want to be encouraging your teammates, try
Yeah,
and keeping up the positive things on a football field.
yeah, exactly
But as I
right.
said, like, they commented so much about the high five, but it was just clear, like, there was two players high fiving, but there was so many Collingwood players just not being able to get back. As I said, and it's one of those things where you say the Collingwood backline are so good for so long and they're a bit off, but as I said, defense doesn't just come from your backline. Your midfield can provide a lot of it, and an entry stopped
Mm.
is just as good as a defended entry. If the ball doesn't even go inside 50, you don't have to worry about defending it. And I think while they are struggling and adjusting there, I think there's a lot more this Collingwood midfield, which is obviously still insanely talented, can do. And, as I said, you can harp on about Nick Dacos, old Dan is great at winning the ball, but, as I said, he's not as big of a two-way player, as I said, and they're just missing that at the
Yeah,
moment. They need that hard nut, high tackling, midfield presence to, as I said, to wait for this to adjust for them, in my opinion.
someone like Taylor Adams, for example.
Yeah, wow. I mean, as I said, it's the hard thing, As I said, you don't know. It was what the Eugenie Mitchell. You don't know what
Mm.
you got till it's gone. Yeah, it's just it's a bit bewildering. Obviously, the salary cap, because obviously in the Premiership, we've always forget the season before that they were in salary cap hell. So
Yeah, and
it's probably a bit to do with that still. It's very hard to manage a Premiership team coming off. Everyone wants that slightly bigger contract, but yeah, they definitely miss him.
well, I
It's a
mean,
bit less depth than last year.
well, the downside to their loss over the weekend is that they brought in our man, Big Billy Frampton, and it still didn't give him
Yeah,
the win.
they put him in the back line. He half listened. He was like in the background. They were just like, oh, you know what? Hampton, yeah, sure, why not put him in? But he doesn't listening. The lockdown forward. You gotta have him in his true position. Um, but honestly, I don't know. Like, who is he on? I'm not even sure in the back line because I
I
didn't see it.
I wasn't looking. I will be honest with you, but it's
Okay.
a little disappointing. As
Yeah,
much as St Kilda's my second team, I like seeing them win. We want Billy Frampton
yeah.
to have a good game,
Well, if they're going to put him back, they had to have put him on King, surely.
probably.
Um, I just checked. Yeah, it seems like it was on King. Because then Darcy Moore gets a bit of that free run, which is, I guess, the idea, bringing him in. Darcy Moore beating a lot one-on-one on the best defenders,
Makes
best
sense.
forwards this year. So try and free him up. And, as I said, it's still... The problems are still there for Collingwood.
Do we want to mention the controversial Jack Higgins goal outside the boundary? Did you
It was
see
in.
it?
I saw it, I believe. I actually watched the last quarter. But yeah, no, man.
I don't
I thought
think I
those.
don't think that like if they had ruled it out of bounds, I don't think it was going to have an impact on the game anyway. Like
Oh
St Kilda
no,
won pretty
I
convincingly.
I think of all the out of bounds decisions, that wasn't nearly as bad as some of the others.
Like the other one that
Like,
happened again in Sydney Essendon.
yeah, yeah, that was pretty bad. Like, at least that one, you're like, okay, you look in the replay, maybe the whole ball's gone over, because that's, people tend to forget that the whole ball going over,
Yeah, it has to be
any
the
bit of
whole
it on the
ball.
line is in. And when you look at that angle, you look at the ball drop, as I said, the ball drop on a slight angle because it's an arcing shot.
Hmm.
You could see why, like, even if it wasn't directly in, your brain would sort of line it up a bit more,
Yep, that's about
So,
right.
as I said, umpiring decisions, and we'll probably talk about it a bit later because I know you might have a bit to say about a future game coming up.
Yeah,
But
maybe I'll go on a rant.
maybe. But it's one of the things you got to recognize about umpiring decisions. It's more what's there's a huge difference between what's callable and what's just incorrect. And a lot
Yep.
of people say what's incorrect is still callable. It's just like a harsher interpretation. Um, but yeah, as I said, that one's just in the realms. It's whatever. You love to see it go through. I don't
If
care.
if the boundary
It's
umpires didn't see it, it doesn't matter.
exactly. It's not even the most controversial kicking goals. So
No, absolutely not. Um, so I'll do a quick rundown of injuries. We already mentioned Mason Wood. It
yeah,
wasn't just concussion, however, he did have a broken collarbone from that incident.
yeah.
Liam Henry went out with a hamstring, and both of
That's
them,
gonna
it
miss a
looks
few
like both
weeks.
of them will miss at least 6 weeks, which is going to hurt
Yeah,
St Kilda. But
yeah, for sure.
uh,
Especially since Henry's just been so good.
yeah, he's been really, really clean with it. Shall we move on?
Yeah, okay. So, in what was a bit of I'll say a weird game between Adelaide and Geelong.
Oh,
Uh,
I saw this game as well. It was, yeah.
yeah, it's weird. As I said, I think a lot of people might have changed their tips from Adelaide to Adelaide at home. Cats with a couple of lays out to Duncans and Atkins, and you thought, with that, Brun, obviously, Guthrie and Rowan all out of the side,
Hmm.
you would have thought that Adelaide would have had a real advantage in the middle.
Especially with Tex coming back. Like, it would have
Well,
had a
yeah,
marking forward.
obviously. As I said, it's nicer when you have stuff forward to go to. Um, and yeah, they did get a bit of a jump early on them, Adelaide.
They did.
But yeah, they Geelong just absolutely slaughtered them out the centre. They generated so many stoppage goals and got so many inside 50s that were just a lot more clean than Adelaide.
And they
Who,
looked.
as most people know, if they've had a recap, absolutely blazed it inside 50s into the hands of one Timothy Stewart. He had 15 intercepts, which 10 of those were intercept marks,
Hmm.
which is crazy.
Yeah, beat the statistic.
And yeah, and as I said, it was all the Adelaide midfielders except, weirdly enough, Matt Crouch, who I thought was solid, the best by the Crows by far. He had 10 score involvements and 90% disposal efficiency
Yeah,
from
he's
Matt
normally
Crouch.
very, very good with his hands. He's very, very efficient.
He's good with his hands, but yeah, it's just. I mean, obviously he didn't generate as much distance as someone like uh, what's his name, Dawson. He
Hmm.
had a pretty mid game. Got a lot of distance, didn't quite get much damaging, but again, from my friends with the shot chart, um, there were from Adelaide. They had 26 inside 50s from 75 to 100 meters out. One of those
Okay.
led to a goal. 20 of them led to a contest. Sorry, one's got to a score.
Hmm.
20 just led to a contest. 5 turned to intercept. From 100 meters out, 2 to score, 7 to contest, 5 intercepts.
That's not a good
Pretty.
percentage.
No, I mean, as I said, compare that to Geelong, which was 4, 10, and 4, to 5, 7, nothing, respectively. And yeah, as I said, just Geelong could penetrate. Adelaide could not. They could get it in there. They just really couldn't. And I think the one thing that was a lot different between Geelong and Adelaide, because a lot of the focus has been on the Adelaide Tolls.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at what the Smalls were able to do for Geelong, when they had the ball into attack, if the ball entered ground, Close Myers, or even a couple of times Manna, is that how you pronounce it?
I think it's
I didn't
Manor.
really. Manna, yeah.
MANNAGH? Manor.
GH, yeah. Second gamer for Geelong, were just always there to dish off to another player. It was always that quick handball to a player in space for an easy as you like goal. Like their goals were pretty. They had time and space to kick him. Danger was fantastic for the 3 quarters where he wasn't injured. And yeah, he had a lot of forward pressure with 4 of his 8 tackles being inside 50, going towards Geelong's scoring. Yeah, I know. And yeah, as I said, and the other thing was from outside the 50, Geelong scored 3 goals too and missed 2 shots, whereas Adelaide didn't score a goal. They just generated 1 point and 4 misses, or just fell short. So, as I said, and this is going to where my last point really for the match, it's Adelaide's offense from last year to this year has absolutely chasmed. And you get this match, you get Taylor Walker, and he definitely was the centerpiece for the inside 50s. He had a lot of targets. But yeah, as I said, it just nothing really happened for them inside. As I said, if it wasn't a Tom Stewart intercept, which it most likely was, they still weren't getting the ball to ground, and they didn't have anyone to mark it.
No.
I even thought the marking efforts were probably even better than the ground ball. Like, Burgess took a couple of marks, and Fogarty took a few as well. Obviously had pretty... Oh, I thought Fogarty had a bad game. Burgess, I think, looks a bit promising.
Okay game.
Yeah.
Still working on his craft.
Yeah. Exactly. He's a defender to forward. He was working a lot on the VFL last year. It's his first AFL standard season as a forward, so we'll see how he goes. But, as I said, I thought it was really Rochelle and Rankin. They've only had 4 score involvements each for 2 prolific players that always get their hands on the ball in their forward line.
Especially Rankin. Like, he was really, really quiet.
Exactly. I mean, Shelley, he still found the ball, but nothing was that impactful. And as I said, it's, as the Crows, a small sample size, but they're now the worst team from scores per inside 50s and set shots per inside 50s, and have the lowest win rate for 1v1 contests in the forward line. So, yeah, it's looking pretty bad there.
Does Stillthorpe make that big of an impact, or are they missing just other key players?
I mean, it's like, as I said, I think, and it's hard because it's only 2 games, and the first game obviously was in very sloppy, wet conditions, and they found their footing back, so maybe this game was just a bit of an aberration, but it just doesn't look good. And as I said, Phil Thorpe, gets a lot of flack, but he still took marks inside 50s. And not only that, you have to defend him.
Yeah.
And I don't think Fogarty draws the next best defender. He's obviously the best defender, still goes on tax at the moment. But yeah, as I said, he just, it wasn't that many leading marks, it was a bit stagnant, as I said, and as I said, by all the intercepts, they weren't even spoiling when their ball did go in there. So it was just, something they need to work on. On the flip side, though, for how bad some of Adelaide football has looked, they still haven't been completely out of the matches they're in. They're reasonably around it. If you look at one of those things that comes out every week, the expected score, it should have actually been a lot closer. I think I actually had Adelaide winning if scores had the, expected value converted going through. Which also says for Geelong just how ridiculous their outside shots have been and shots from the boundary. Jeremy Cameron should be locked up in jail for some of the shots that he's getting through.
I agree.
Um,
His accuracy is criminal.
yeah. So yeah, maybe there'll be some normalization, but I don't know. I just think that this is Geelong, and I think they're going to be a real comeback. Yeah, as I said, Adelaide, it's worrying just how different it was from last year,
Hmm.
and you don't want to be giving up away too many home games when you're looking to improve on that record from last season.
Yeah.
But I could see them coming back. It just needs a bit of polish, a bit of je ne sais quoi fixed up. But yeah, as always, I got my limelight players, the players that you expect to win, get it, and were recognised by the AFL. Stuart Myers-Hawkins, big gloves, especially when Stanley got that knock. He never really came onto the ground, and big gloves had to shoulder much of it.
Hmm.
And Crouch and Laird, I had. I didn't quite think Dawson was clean enough but he had the ball enough. And the spotlight, for some reason, the deadly duo, I thought both of them were standouts, but
Yeah.
close. Still generating a lot of score involvements. De Conning absolutely towered up Fogarty. Malira off halfback generated probably the most excitement of Adelaide's ball movement. And
Yep, I agree.
as I said earlier, Burgess, as I said, he just gets a nod. Like, it's one of the things he's like, well, it wasn't quite a big match, but it's probably what the coach wants you to do. And if he can get that sort of effort from in the season and build a tiny bit more, it might go toward restoring a bit of offense for Adelaide.
Yeah, no, I think that's all pretty much accurate, and I think that pretty much sums up that entire game. Where are we going next? We going to Sydney Essendon, or are we going to one of the other Saturday games?
Yeah, Sydney Essendon, just because I don't want to go back to back, because I wrote notes on Freo North. Or we
Yeah,
could just yeah,
no,
and we'll just briefly cover
we'll do
Hawks
Sydney
Melbourne.
Essendon. That's fine.
Yeah.
So pretty much up until the third. Oh, scoreline for Sydney Essendon: 19-17, 131 to 15-11, 101. It was pretty seesawing contest, pretty much all the way up to halfway through the third. Like, they were all. It was scoreline was back and forth. They were pretty much goal for goal for a
It
lot
was
of it.
really the last quarter that blitz.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was 6 goals to 5 in the last.
Yeah, Essendon made a late surge in the fourth, as you mentioned. But they got 5 key goals. Jade Gresham and Jake Stringer both kicking 3-1. Kyle Langford and Peter Wright, Mr. 2-meter Peter himself. We'll talk about him in a moment. They also had major impact all throughout the day, but Sydney was just too good. And you look at their midfield at the moment. You look at their forward line, like Mr. Isaac Heaney, who could be leading the Brownlow at the moment.
Could be
32 touches, 8 clearances, 4 tackles, and 1-1 on the scoreboard.
Yeah, and just narrowly avoiding ruining the chances. Conspiracy theorists say same as the jumper punch that whoever got on for. I can't remember.
Was it one of the ones from last week?
Yeah. Anyway, it was a similar one, but I don't know. I didn't think there was as much in it. It's just 50-50. I wouldn't be doing it, but sometimes you get off.
I went through the MRO notes, and most of it was just fines. Like, there wasn't really anything too big of note. I thought Tom Papley and Will Hayward.
2 meter big of note, though.
Oh, yeah, we'll touch on that. Tom Papley and Will Hayward leading goal scoring for the Swans, kicking 3-1 and 4-1. I had a look at the stats specifically, like all the all of the stats that the AFL actually offers to us in the public eye. And for the most part, it was pretty even across the board. The only ones that Essendon were a lot worse in were clangers inside 50, and they were really lacking in marks inside 50 as well. Like, they just had no, despite having 2 massive targets in the forward line, they just weren't getting the ball at all.
Yeah, I think it's just also the other thing. Essendon's defense are pretty battered at the moment.
Sydney are also a really good 1% team.
Yeah, as I said, and as I said, sometimes you see the one percenters and like, well, sometimes it's just you playing behind the ball, but Sydney's more like, okay, we'll get everything to a contest and we'll just work harder than the opposition.
Yeah, they take their
Um,
second efforts, they take their third efforts, they'll do anything to get the ball back.
exactly. And Essendon historically, as I said, they have been known as the bruise-free Bombers in years past.
It's
But
true.
they did take it up to him. Obviously, a bit of the thing about were Essendon going a bit harder, whether was it like some sort of fake bravado, which I don't know. I'm a bit mixed on it.
I mean,
Like I don't like seeing.
this is probably one of Essendon's best games since sometime like midway through last season. Like,
Yeah, like honestly, said the scoreline was really just reflected to how probably battered Essendon's backline is at the moment. Um, But yeah, as I said, it's one of the things where I don't mind to see it, but it's gonna bite them eventually, as I said, in the bad performances. Because right now, although, Essendon look alright,
mhm.
they are very top heavy with their performances. And this week, obviously, it was Merritt leading the pack, Setterfield with another fantastic
one
game.
man, one man that I was really excited to actually see out there was Sam Draper.
Oh yeah.
And so it
Yeah,
like
but
he's probably one of my favorite ruckmen at the moment. Like I think
yeah,
he's just really really
they
good, and they definitely need him back.
yeah, and it's one of those things where they eased him into the game, but he provided a lot from what I saw. Um, yes, especially in the hitouts. Oh, Goldie, he's sort of the player that you want to sort of manage because he is a workhorse, but getting old,
Yeah,
obviously.
he's in his twilight years.
And yeah, exactly. The more you can balance that, and obviously Draper's just that forward threat who they sort of need at the moment. Um, yeah, as I said, the more balanced those two will be, the more Essendon's forward line will look pretty potent. And I think they've actually been playing a bit better than I've expected anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so far. So
No,
a bit of optimism for the Bombers there. But as I said, it's just that complete, performance, as I said, from the midfield. There's a few, you know, yeah, like
it's just something
there's
they'll need to
players
work
like
through.
players like Nick Cox who at times look like a good player to be on the wing. That's sort of a bit stalled, I
Mm-hmm.
think, in his development. Um, yeah, and as I said, it's just. But when you look at the Sydney and like their complete depth of their midfield, it's just ridiculous, really.
Mm.
Like I said, you got Matt Roberts, he floats off far back, but even he goes into the midfield sometimes and provides a bit. And it's just, it's just ridiculous where they keep finding these players from. Uh, yeah,
No, I
Sydney.
agree.
Just
Um,
is there any way the AFL can just force a team to rebuild properly? Like
uh,
force them to be crap for a while?
I mean,
They try to do it.
they could just build an entirely new team instead.
Yeah. Just yeah, just literally take all of Sydney's players to Tasmania, and then make them rebuild from
Yeah,
the draft.
why not?
I reckon.
Why not?
It's just silly.
Well, the only injury that we have to note is pretty much the big main one from the round is
Yeah,
Harry Cunningham. It was a nasty head knock caused by 2 meter Peter. He's going
yeah,
to be out it's not just concussion, so he's going to be out for a while. It's
mm.
pretty nasty. Um,
And to an important player too.
yeah,
Like as
like
I said,
he's
he's
been
not
really big for
as
Sydney.
ball accumulator, but pressure wise, like as I said, the reason like Sydney prevent you from marking, they prevent you from having uncontested possession, and Harry Cunningham's like a big component of that. So that'll be a huge loss.
I guess the only other thing to talk about in regards to that is like, is it worth 3+ weeks, or is it like what Lee
Oh,
Montagna
in
is
my
saying, is that
opinion.
it's the only action he could have done in that moment because his eyes were completely on the ball? Does he actually have a case to answer?
Yeah, but when you say that, That's like the action. The way the AFL's framed it is basically leaving the ground is a decision.
Yes,
in
absolutely.
a way. So it doesn't really matter if you turn or not. Like that impact will be probably 3 weeks.
Yeah.
However, the difference between the other weeks that have gotten like, Pal Peppers, it's similar to Pal Peppers. I'll say that.
Yeah, it is pretty close.
Like, yeah, it's the action. Like I said, you get 3 weeks for the decision to leave the ground and you hit the player's head, or in Pal Peppers, obviously you swap that with, the bump instead of the tackle.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's not much you can do about it. As I said, yeah, I don't think there was any malice in it.
No,
Again, maybe
absolutely
you could
not.
argue, oh, Essendon were going too hard, and then the instinct is just to try and do that damage. But I just think it's just sort of one of those. Like I said, I was a bit harsh. I initially said, oh, it was a bit dumb by Peter Wright, but I just think you're going to get a few of those.
I mean, it probably was a little bit silly.
Yeah, like as I said, it's just one of those things where the AFL's trying to get fewer moments of that, and as I said, you'll get silly ones that will just, as I said, mildly silly brain fades. You get 3 weeks for it. It sucks for Peter Wright. I don't think he meant it.
No, absolutely not.
And especially as a bigger person, like they're the people that are going to be a lot more conscious because it's just so easy to do. But yeah, as I said, I don't think I'll start calling him a dirty player because of it.
No, he's definitely not a dirty player. Because my point of view of it, from what the footage shows, is that his eyes were completely on the ball. He must have just seen the player in his peripheral and figure, oh my god, I might have to brace for this, and try to protect himself. And it just happens. Maybe it is worth 3 weeks.
Yeah, another thing. Yeah. And because the discussion brought up, they say, oh, we should bring back the send off for things like this. But is that really the action you want to see sent off? Because
no, you want to. If you're going to use something like a send off, you want it for something a lot more dirty, something that's more purposeful.
Exactly. But the hard thing to decide on the ground, especially for a third umpire, is like what's dirty. And that's why, I've always been a bit skeptical on using send-offs. I think it's going to be a bit more, not so much harmful good, but I think, as I said, if the AFL is going to stick with substitution, I think it's fine.
Let's just like throw a random idea out there. There were plenty of casual brawls over the weekend. There were 2 in this match specifically.
Yeah.
Would you just casually take one player out from each team if there was if it's involved in a brawl,
like
or something
a
like
bin?
Yeah,
I don't know. As I said,
because that's the sort of decision you kind of have to weigh up.
I think so. I think it's just fines. As I said, I think
they all got fines.
Decide some games. As I said, they're like, okay, we don't mind losing a bit of our paycheck this week just to go hard at it, but they're not going to do it every week. As I said, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what goes through players' minds when they go through brawls. I just couldn't be bothered as a player.
No,
but I'm also not competitive enough to play AFL football or even remotely close. So maybe it's just something I'll never understand. Yeah, it's just I don't know. I definitely like some of the chill players that just don't. They're just so unfazed by the fights. You always see them. They're just walking around.
You're there to play footy. You're not there to fight people.
Yeah, I must admit, it is primitively entertaining as long as no one gets really hurt.
No, yeah, I agree. Shall we move on to Freo North?
Yeah, this is a surprisingly interesting game. Especially if you look at the end scoreline, you think, oh, North did okay, but really, North, I think, really could have beaten Freo if they just converted a bit more early. So the final scoreline was 11-10-76 to 5-15-102. And again, similar to Brisbane last week, North just brought pressure early. They dominated stoppages, and their midfield was fast, pressuring, and they just had so many options in transition. While you looked at it, and Freo just had that stereotypical stagnant ball movement, that, the papers absolutely hated last year.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
just very boring to watch. Similar to, I guess, Hawthorn, just a lot of chip kicking around. Yeah, and basically
It's something that Geelong used to
they
do, and just people just don't like watching it. It's the worst kind of
yeah, and it's
football.
one of those things, it's like sometimes it works, but then they'll like have a game where it doesn't and they're just like, never play that way, but I guess it's wait and see to how Frio really
Hmm.
does it.
Yeah.
As I said, right now they're lacking consistency because they've had quarters where they've been dominated and then just flick the light switch. Um, yeah, so as I said, Frio had very stagnant ball movements. The mids got a lot of interception,
Hmm.
and even North's defense, which, as you know, completely undermanned, they had their own against Frio for a good chunk of it. Like, you see some of the first half goals for Frio, they were very lucky to be in it. Like, they were just accidental free kicks, a few very lucky goals, and probably again, like last week, Tracy was probably actually one of the more damaging forwards
Hmm.
in terms of generation. Jai Amos had a very quiet game. And then the third quarter happened, an absolute collapse. Freo dominated the Kangaroos in possessions and inside 50s. Brayshaw, who had very poor disposals first half, there was a few times where he actually sort of gave himself some intercept possessions because he turned the ball over
And then
and
immediately got it
just
back.
tackled to won it back. Yeah, which I thought was a very unique way to boost your stats. And also led by Jackson, who
Yeah.
absolutely
I was gonna
beasted the
mention
game.
him. He
Like
had a great game.
he absolutely like Cherry was okay, especially for a young rock. But it was just around the ground where, as I said, that pace, that marking, yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And Taberner sort of showed up in the first quarter, third quarter as well. Like, it was just a couple of strong marking goals that kept Frio ahead. Sort of out of nowhere, really. He had a very quiet game. And yeah, Freo ended up winning the quarter 47-7 and just locked the game up from there. North's defense honestly just lost structure. There was so many loose players, so much space that Freo were just easily able to get their goals. And yeah, all in all, North can probably still hold their head high.
Hmm.
The most concerning part was the drop off was probably from players that they really don't want to have sort of the drop off if they're going to win some close games. Stephenson, Larkey, Simpkins, they all had good moments, but they all were very patchy and sort of led to a bit of inconsistency at times for North, where, yeah, as I said, they just didn't quite convert all their opportunities of dominance at the starting. Um, yeah, basically, it's done half of the match.
Yeah, I was
Um,
looking over some of the stats on Sunday, and like
mm,
but the differences between the first half and the second half, especially with those three specific players, is really dramatic. Like they just it's like they
yeah,
disappeared for the second half of the game.
yeah, and it's like, and they had a few others that like it, but someone like Tom Powell, for instance, who was so prolific in the first half.
Hmm.
Had a very quiet forward, but even he managed to, and you can argue it was a bit of junk time, but I thought it was good that North Melbourne still were trying to fight back and did a few good things late. As you said, Wardlaw, he was pretty consistent throughout. A couple of times he made a few errors. Zach Fisher is another one that, while patchy, I think overall still presented opportunities. And as I said, like some other young teams, you just take a few of those clangers um, and just say, hey, we didn't convert all the time, but the structure was there. And if we do this against a team that's a bit closer to our ability, we
Yep.
might actually get the win. But yeah, as I said, it's just, yeah, as I said, some of those older players that you probably just wanted a bit more out of. Even I guess Darcy Tucker on the wing, was just a bit there. Like I said, after once North's inside midfield tended to tire out at moments, there was just not as much outside game. So yeah, as I said, it was weirdly disappointing in a way. Like as I said, North definitely actually had the opportunity to have a huge upset. Fremantle they actually have a pretty good record against. Like it had some ridiculous. Well, they had the win last year. They had the draw the year before. But yeah, as I said, it just wasn't quite complete for them. But
Yep.
there's a lot to like about the game from them. So in the limelight, Jackson, Ryan, Sarong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably Brayshaw as well, as I said. Even though
Plays
Sarong was more consistent,
plays you kind of
Brayshaw just had a
expect to stand up.
ridiculous, yeah. Yeah, Wardlaw, Sherry, LDU. Like, there was a lot of top end good games for that. And the one I like a bit more, the Spotlight, Bailey Banfield.
Yeah.
He was generating a bit more. Like, is a sort of a player, sort of every year you're half expecting to lose, and they keep on putting him in the forward line for a bit of pressure. But this year, he actually generated a bit more score than usual, which was very promising because, as I said, obviously Suskowski for Schultz is, very good, but they still need a bit of generation. And if Banfield can get that, he definitely deserves a bit of his spot. I also said Walker for Fremantle. Again, he didn't have a big game, but just some of that speed in the first quarter when Freo were looking stagnant, he was the only one that was willing to run and take the ball. And, as I said, while they're a bit damaged on half-back line,
Mm-hmm.
Walker might be a very good inclusion for them. And yeah, I think a couple of Northern backline. Fisher, McKercher, even Pink. Like, Pink obviously didn't do as well defensively, got a bit cleaned up by, I think he was on Tracy. Fisher was on Tabernar, kept him quiet for most of the game. And McKercher off the half-back line. Yeah, he's just generating a bit more. Didn't seem to get beaten too much one-on-one. Yeah, it was just sort of always around and always providing for a second game player. He looked very settled, sort of a bit like Sheasel was playing, like a bit less prolific, but it's the same sort of style that Sheasel started before. He's obviously, rotating between halfback and midfield now.
Yeah, that's very true. All right, shall we move on to the Sunday games?
Yes.
We'll go to Ballarat. Let's go to the Bulldogs and the Gold Coast Suns.
Yeah.
It wasn't honestly a very interesting game. I had a look at some of the highlights because I didn't get to watch it, but Bulldogs pretty much they just had full control. So scoreline was 18-7-115 to 10-7-67. But the whole tempo of the game was started pretty much around the first quarter because the Doggies kicked 9-1 in the first quarter.
Yeah.
It just and they just carried that momentum pretty much the entire day.
Yeah.
I got to mention Cody Waitman, of course.
Yeah, 6 goals
from 14 touches.
Yeah.
The Bont, as per normal, dominant in the middle. He had 32 touches, 19 contested, 11 clearances, and 7 score involvements.
Mm-hmm.
He was, 6 goals from 14 touches is pretty impressive, but I think Bont was probably their best on ground.
Oh, it has to be, especially again, like, you look at how ridiculous the Gold Coast midfield has been. But again, it's like, not so much against midfields, but obviously Adelaide, they've had maybe a bit of struggles. Who was their other win against?
Us.
Yeah, Richmond. But yeah, as I said, they just, as I said, I think it's a bit of a needed return to reality because, you saw their games and they're like, well, they've been a bit patchy.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously a lot of good things, but I wouldn't quite believe so much in them. And I think the defense, as I said, 18-7, a lot of scoring shots. It's the one where you actually wonder whether their defense has actually improved enough to, as I said, because they're looking to be a well-rounded team. As I said, keep on saying their best is fine. Like they showed that last season. It's more just providing that throughout the year, and this is just sort of the, you can't win every game. I'm not that worried about them losing this, but yeah, I think it's just more the response.
As long as they can show us more consistency,
Exactly.
That's all
It's
we
just whether
ask.
this is one of the games that are scattered in where they just get a bit beaten, or again, whether this is just they've got a midfield group that just pops up and down. But I don't know.
Well, I mean,
It is what it is. The Bulldogs are the opposite too.
oh
Like
yeah,
as I said,
absolutely.
their midfield is just so consistent, and then up and down at either end really.
Mm,
I think the defense is improving, but again, like the title says, Ed Richards injured, Nick Caulfield injured.
injured.
It's just not great. As I said, I saw bits of this game. Buki Karmas, I thought was pretty good, and I think he's a sort of a player where you know he's going to be some of the next player that they're going to sort of build around in the back line.
Yeah, I agree because I
Yeah,
talked about him during the practice matches when we covered those,
yeah,
and I thought he looked really good. He just needs to have a bit more solid structure around him, and he can be a really dynamic player for their backline.
yeah. Because as I said, like if he gets the ball, he's pretty good out of it. He's a player that can float up a bit to generate a few scores
Hmm.
as well. And technically, you can play him swing, but I'd probably like to see him in the back line, you know.
He looks more comfortable in the
Um,
backline.
and it's such a nice tandem with Jason Johannesson as well, because, as I said, it's just at any given time, you have a player that's able to burst through and generate to what is a blistering, like any forward movement for the Dogs is just so dangerous. It's just, yeah, as I said, a matter of keeping that up. Um, as I said, they tend to go missing at times. More their forward line
Hmm.
and their defense just, one on one, it isn't quite as strong. The other thing to know, obviously, is Sam Darcy. How good was he?
Ah, brilliant.
Yeah. And it's just, you know, when they're looking for forward line consistency, they obviously drop Lob, but it's just throughout the game. And again, I didn't watch all of it, so I can't exactly say, but he just seemed a lot more present than Lob tends to be.
Mm.
Like, as good as Lob is, and he is fantastic, like, I've always, like, I've never been a Lob fan,
But
but
you've
I
always
always think
admired
that
him.
some of his are just his best. Like, it's just the play. You've got to be following a team he's in to really understand how good he is when he's on.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
it's
I
just
agree.
like over a season, is that worth it? Because as I said, he
He
disappears,
has
and
his
for such a
patches.
clean hands, if he just found himself in better positions, it would be so good. But at this point, I just think they stick with Darcy from here on in, unless there's an injury or they want to muck around with their forward line structure. Yeah, I wouldn't be rushing to put in Lob anytime soon,
Yeah, I agree.
which is a shame. I like him, but yeah.
If they look better with Darcy, you may as well keep Darcy in, give him the game
Yeah,
time.
exactly. One
Uh,
game, but as I said, it
yeah,
just as sort of player, hard not to enjoy it. Obviously, the Luke Darcy connection. Uh, yeah, it's just
experience in a young kid is good, win or loss. But
yeah,
a win is even
exactly.
better.
Yeah,
We did touch on the Gold Coast quad. Miller, Flanders, Anderson, Rowell.
yeah,
They all looked, as they do. They usually look pretty good. They had 25 plus disposals, all of them. All of them had four
yeah,
plus clearances, but they were really key beaten on one-on-ones and contested possessions, especially when they had to line up
yeah,
against Bond. There's not much more you can really do against that man. Um, I want to
yeah.
touch on Sam Collins for the Suns because I think he was their best on
Oh,
ground. He
yeah.
had 16 touches, 100% efficiency, 10 intercepts, 4 score involvements, 8 1%ers, and he did not touch the bench. He was on
Yeah.
ground the entire game.
Honestly, like maybe a controversial opinion. I think maybe low-key dirty dog move by Sam Collins. His haircut. How do you not think is a Bulldogs player? Like honestly, dirty mustache, half a mullet. He belongs on that Bulldogs list. And you got some tall like midfielders like Bond. He's looking, the way he looks down the forward, he's looking at the heads. He's not Caleb Daniel. Like Caleb Daniel, he'll probably see a bit of jersey in his peripheral, but the Bond is probably identifying by hair.
I
And it's
just
just
I've just brought it up on the YouTube video, and yeah, he's it's a look. We'll just say that
yeah,
much.
yeah. As I said, I just think it's the way going forward. I think if you're facing the Bulldogs, Either, get that dirty mullet combo, or maybe dye your hair blonde. Either or. Rack up the intercepts. I think AFL defenses need to invest more in hairstylists to shore up, and there's a few teams you can take advantage of.
Maybe he just wants to be a rugged man.
Yeah. Another one, Geelong. Dye your hair blonde. Get a headband.
No, they have too many.
Oh,
They have too many blondes on that team already.
yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. When you face them, and then you can get the intercept mark because I think it's kicking to Dempsey.
Oh, true.
But no, that's just yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's a bit too cracked. Maybe I won't find my way on an AFL analyst team. With this
maybe not
opinion.
anytime soon.
Maybe.
We did touch on
They
the
always
injuries.
say that about the next thoughts.
Did touch on the injuries briefly.
Yeah.
Nick Caulfield out with a shoulder injury, pretty unlucky for him. Ed Richards out with concussion. No MRO ruling came from that, which was kind of expected. It was just a football act that happened. But he will miss the game against the Eagles this week, which I don't think is going to be too much of an issue, really.
No, I mean, it's just really the players. Like, see players that anytime they get hit, you get a bit oof about them. It's just Caulfield obviously would have been a better player for the Saints if he had a run at it. And Richards has definitely had a few seasons where injuries just sort of prevented him developing probably as much as he could. Still a good player, still tracking, very useful, but as I said, he's just... I always feel Richard probably could have been a bit better than he is now if he had a bit more consistency, but football's like that at times.
And then for the Suns, Bailey Humphrey, injured with a shoulder. He'll probably be out for a couple of weeks as well. That's pretty much it for that game. Shall we? Do you want to touch on another game before we move on to ours?
Oh, yeah. Briefly touch on West Coast GWS.
There's not much to talk about, really.
Yeah, it's just another absolute midfield dominance by Greater Western Sydney. Unfortunately, BJ Williams, try as hard as he might, he probably had one of his worst games for a while, getting absolutely smashed by Kieran Briggs. As I said, West Coast just simply don't get their hands on the ball enough. Any games, they're like nearly at least 50 possessions behind the other team, which generally isn't good anyway.
No.
And it just sort of sucks because I think their defense has taken step forwards. I don't think their back line is the worst defense anymore. And you look at some of their stats, like last year they were just so far away from any AFL standard team, it wasn't funny.
Yeah, it's very true.
This year, not as bad, and you really got to hope that maybe they can move on from there. But on the flip side, it's just, again, with Oscar Allen missing, they're still, for the lack of inside 50s, they still score all right. But yeah, as I said, this game, they were very wasteful, 5-13 to 6-12, 108. But yeah, as I said, their backline, Barras and McGovern both had fantastic games. And
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, you just sort of hope that they do. There was one stat that I wanted to mention.
What did you find?
I found and this is actually to go to another game, back to Hawthorn Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
Hawthorn took 4 contested marks for the whole game out of 116.
That
two
is
players.
Crazy.
Yeah, 2 players. One of them's Darcy Cameron, who took 4 contested marks, equaled them. And you can guess from this game who the player that took more contested marks is in the back line. Absolutely feasted. Sam Taylor.
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry, my mind was just blanking for a minute.
No, it's okay. 6 contested marks. That was just beating out the whole of Hawthorn.
Sam Taylor had a brilliant game.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of GWS had a brilliant game.
Yeah, it was just sort of unfair, because I look at some of the entries, and it wasn't like there were terrible by West
A lot
Coast.
of it was like
And
panicked entries. Like they were just rushing the ball,
yeah,
trying to get it inside 50.
exactly. And obviously, Darling didn't have a great game again, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to be any further going up against Taylor at the moment. I'm not really sure that there was as much Darling could do, but yeah,
No, he's easily top 3 intercept defender in the competition at the moment.
I just give him number one. Just defender full stop. He works one on one. He gets the intercept possessions. Doesn't lose much. Just yeah, give him the best, I reckon.
The one player for GWS, at least for the second half, I didn't see because I didn't
Yeah,
see the first half, that I thought was a little bit quiet in the second half was Riccardi.
yeah. He had a few options early. I think he took one goal and had like a few marks. And as I said, McGovern absolutely really eventually got on top of him. But I don't know. I think you just see that from Greater Western Sydney is they get so many great forwards at the moment. Obviously, Cadman actually took the role. Brown had a pretty mediocre game as well. He's if you aren't paying too much attention to the Giants, he was absolutely fantastic in the first 2 games.
Yes, he was.
And only scored was like let's see here, it's 5 disposals, 0 goals, 1 on Tom Cole in the back line. Good win for him, who I've mentioned a bit. Sort of needs to have a good season. I think he has so far.
I mean, last I saw, he's Callum Brown is still top 5 in the Brownlow medal, in the Coleman medal.
Yeah, no, he had a very good. I mean,
he's only going up against his own teammate in Jesse Hogan, but you
exactly.
know.
Yeah, exactly. Hoag's still very good. Back in his hometown.
12 goals
state.
across the past 3 games is a pretty good stat at the moment.
Exactly. So yeah, no, I think you just see that. Like I said, it really doesn't matter who. The fact that it's there for GWS is what makes them so threatening.
Yeah.
And they just got so many players that can interchange. You know that it's going to be hard to score against them. And honestly, I know Sydney's been impressive, but I want to say GWS at this point.
I think they're the best team in the comp right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're on the same page with that.
Yeah, New South Wales is just dominating football.
They really are feasting right now.
Yeah, which, I mean, I don't know. I don't mind it.
No, I don't mind it either. I think it's actually good for the game if the interstate teams are getting better.
Exactly. Especially with the round 0 stuff, but I don't know. I don't want to be too controversial to you and say it's always good when the Victorians aren't doing as well.
That's just me. Well, as long as it's not Carlton or Geelong, then I don't mind.
Yeah, but all Victorian teams are like that. They're like, oh, I'm the one good Victorian team. All the other Victorian teams are scummy. I don't believe that for a second.
Oh no,
like
we know we have some issues.
Yeah, look, North, St Kilda.
St Kilda's probably a
Bulldogs.
decent team. Bulldogs.
They're probably the 3 that can get away with.
North,
we're slightly screwed over.
North, when they were a lot better at the game, I think we're a little bit more But now that they've sort of, they're growing as a young team, it's been a while since they've had that sort of bad rap sort of thing. They're a lot more enjoyable, I guess, to support.
I must admit, Geelong as a team, like, their fans are very, very strong at the moment. Like, they can't take bad things. They're very pessimistic fan base for how fantastic they've been. But yeah, they did not to get the best of the AFL. Like, it's still ridiculous that they just don't get as many games at Goomba where they could really cement themselves as a powerhouse. Like, if they had home ground advantage properly, I reckon you'd add another couple of premierships to their tally.
The issue is that it's still a small stadium.
Oh, I know that. Like it is what it is.
If it was like as big as Marvel, for an example, they'd have more. They'd absolutely have more home games because it's all about ticket sales.
I know.
It's all about revenue. It's just
as a fan though, you still can't help to have a bit of a chip on your shoulder. Like
I understand. I get it. I agree.
Like but as I said, it's just one of the weird quirks of the AFL. Like in terms of sporting leagues, they are absolutely atrocious in terms of like home ground fairness is
And
just all a bit.
and put a really good note into as a perspective on it. This season, the 2024 season, is the
Mm,
first time in 7 years that Richmond will have to play at GMHBA Stadium.
yeah,
Because the last time we played
exactly.
there was
Mm,
2017. It was the last loss of the season that we had before we went on to win the
yeah.
premiership.
And I guess this could segue good into the next game.
Ah, yeah, so
Travis
Richmond,
Boak,
Port Adelaide, and Travis Boak's
yeah,
350th.
350th games, 36
Bef-
at
bef-
the MCG.
Before we touch on anything else in this game, do you think he could push for 400? Do you think his body's still in it?
Honestly, he's so fit. It's just his impact's dropped off a bit. Like, it really depends how much we need him on the wing, because, if I guess we'll talk about it. Someone like Jace Burgoyne
Mm-hmm.
ends up developing a bit. I think Trav, like, is the best team player ever. Like, as I said, there was some talk about him resting this game, to get that home game. But yeah, as I said, for me, it's hard to see him getting to 400. But
Because I did the
you
math on
know,
it yesterday, and if he was to play every single game this season,
yeah,
plus maybe one or two finals, depending on how far Port goes into finals.
yeah,
Well, from outside perspective, they're likely going to make top eight. I think that's no doubt at the
yeah, I
moment.
would say so.
But it depends on how far they go, is how many more he plays, right?
Yeah,
So that'll be at least another 20 odd games if he plays all of them. He would have
yeah,
to still play another full season plus another couple of games to be able to make 400. It's
yeah.
not. It's
It,
probably not a sure thing.
no, I said I don't think it's actually likely. I think Travis is more likely to retire at the end of this season.
Yeah, I think so too.
But that being said, he definitely has the I mean, it's Tom Brady, like the preparation that he does to keep his body going, like
Is elite.
absolutely, like he's added years to his career just through preparation,
Mm.
and because that like there was probably late 2010s, he was like, oh, he's probably one of the worst captains going around, Boki should retire, and then it's just been a resurgence, and it's been absolutely fantastic to see because I hated all that talk. As I said, I think most Port Adelaide fans did too. You can see why it was there, but as I said, it was just one of those things where when he wasn't playing, and you get a few players like that,
Mhm.
when they lead from the front, when they're not doing too well, when they have something like captaincy on it, they just don't go too well.
Yeah, no, and
Once that was a
that's
leave,
and I'm about to
fantastic.
kind of lead with that. Like that we and oh well, there was an interview I think with Nick Vlaston earlier in the week
Hmm.
talking about just how the team's changed and new dynamics and stuff like that. And he talked about
Mm,
Dylan Grimes and
yeah,
him relinquishing the co-captaincy and
yeah,
how his game has suddenly gotten back to a better standard than it was last season. And we think that was all kind of just
yeah,
due to the pressures of having a captaincy. It's just
yeah.
sometimes it just gets to you and it's just not worth it.
Exactly. And I think that's why you see more teams shifting towards like a more leadership group where the captain or pretty much every line has a captain
That's how he
nowadays.
was in our premiership years because we had Trent
Yeah.
Cotchin as like the midfield leader plus primary captain, and then you had Jack Rewalt in the forward
Mm,
line and Alex Rance in the back line.
yeah.
So it's a good way to
That's why you
have that sort
see,
of key
yeah.
structure.
Because before it's like, oh, you got to have your midfielder as captain because they cover the most ground, they can have the impact.
No,
But,
disagree.
as I said, when it's lines, well, that's what I'm saying. It's the old line of thinking.
Yeah,
Whereas nowadays, you can just have it to the best leader. A lot of it will be impact in training, standards, fitness,
yeah. It's not just
and all that
on
sort of
field;
stuff.
it's also off field.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And as I said, it just leads to more consistent footy. And yeah,
Shall we talk about the actual game then? In that case,
yes,
um,
yes, we'll get onto it.
so the scoreline was 13-14-92 to 18-14-122. Um,
Yeah,
we played. We were really in it for a lot of it.
yeah,
I thought we came back really hard in the third. Put it up. Liam Baker, the the hero that he is.
Yeah.
He loves to bake some goods for us, and he gave us 2 goals in 90 seconds to make it 7 points at the end of the third term.
Yeah.
But Port just do their thing, break out of, get some easy clearances out the
Yeah.
middle, give it
Exactly.
to your
It's
leaders
just
in Finlayson and
Del Rosie and
Rosie.
Butters out the middle.
I'm thinking of more like your talls at the forward line.
Oh, and the forward line, yeah, sure. Like Todd Marshall.
Yes, Todd Marshall.
4
Thank you
goals
very
too.
much. That's the one I couldn't think
No
of.
worries. Sorry, yeah. No, I got where you came from.
Yeah, it's just they just cleaned up really, really easily in the fourth. We just ran out of legs. We had 9 players under 70 games, 7 of them under 20. So it's a very young side. And for us to be able to at least play up to you for 3 quarters is pretty impressive for us.
And I think, as I said, and I mentioned a few other teams, it's like, a bit more effort has to be done defending from the midfield. I think the Tigers are actually a team to look for when you look at that effort, and again, like they didn't quite have all their players. Ross had to play more of a midfield group because of the loss of Hopper, I think.
Hopper and Prestia. He was kind of playing...
And Prestia, of course,
both roles.
Yeah. And as I said, and it was one of those things where I just had that sinking feeling in the second quarter because it was Port Adelaide playing at their most vulnerable, and it was just them getting the ball, you allow them to get the uncontested possession, and then as I said, Richmond would just wait for the turnover and just go so fast because Port press high, you can do it. Like, it takes a lot of discipline. Like, you have to wait for that opportunity, and sometimes that's hard because Port's getting so much of the ball, and as players, you're keen to get your hand on the ball. But I think Richmond were very good at doing this, and I think looking at it, they had 13 turnovers generated from inside the centre square, and they got 8 scores from it, which is pretty fantastic, I think.
No, I agree. It's the whole reason why. Well, actually, no, we kind of recruited Hopper and Taranto for clearances.
Yeah.
But our turnover game has always been something we've been proud of. It's the pressure games that we kind of won our premierships on. And whilst transitioning to a new game style under a new coach and new assistant coaches, there's always going to be that some type of core in there, and it's probably something that Uze kind of brought over from Melbourne.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, it's one of the things you never want to just copy and paste, like premiership years, with your old team, because then when you get players that don't fit the system, eventually you just wane off and you can't support. As I said, you just get that sharp drop off where eventually you run out of the veterans and your team just goes to crap.
Yeah,
but
I think
I feel like
I think we do have some young players that aren't quite ready yet. And I don't just mean like
you got like injuries as well.
We get that too, but that's kind of why we played so many younger players, because Uze.
Exactly.
I was listening to Uze's press conference from the game, and he's pretty much said that if a player is not 100% fit, I don't want to play them. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he said, and I respect that because you want to put your players' health first. That's why we didn't play Broad. That's why Morris didn't line up at the end of the day.
And as I said, it's like one of those things where, obviously it's not exactly what happened to West Coast. I'm not saying that they put in players that weren't injured.
There's a fair chance they did, though, but besides the point.
Yeah, I know. Like, I'm not saying this accusatorily, but definitely there was a lot more moments where West Coast were rushing players back. And as I said, it's just that constant rotation. You'd rather a player miss a week and be able to play a few more games of the season.
And you also want to give games to the younger players, give them that experience.
But when they deserve it as well.
Yeah,
exactly.
Of course.
So, as I said, I think that's good. And a lot of what the Tigers are doing, I think, is quite fine at the moment. It's just a bit sad that they don't have quite the people power for it at the moment, because they're playing, I think, some very good football.
Well, we should get part of our backline back for our game against the Swans this week. Like, we'll get Young back, we'll get Broad back, so at least it'll be something. But I think still a rough game to go up against.
But the thing that's just bad and is probably going to be bad for a while is I think the Tigers forward line.
Yep, I agree.
Inside 50 mark, 17-7, and Lynch is
Lynch
just
was just shut
not
down all
it.
day.
Yeah, he's just not it for the leading forward you can build around. And they really need to decide what they're going to do, whether they just, accept the loss, put in a youngster. Obviously, you have a few, that are just ish players. Jacob Kaczynski, Samson Ryan.
To be fair, Cosy was only
Oh,
just recruited.
yeah, I know.
Can't put
Like,
too
I'm not
much
going to
pressure
be
on
too
him.
harsh on him. But, you know what I mean? It's like they need to decide if they aren't going to play through Lynch, which is a bit debatable at the moment because, even he's just not providing structure.
What I think,
At that point, you might as well be playing a youngster.
no, I agree. But
He's just
what I think Lynch should do
too-
is he should have the role that Jack had, which was go
Yeah,
further up the ground, be the tall in that presence, so you can pass it over to the other tall that's deeper in the forward line, which in our case would be Bolter,
Yeah,
since we're not playing him
exactly. And
back.
it's not like he hasn't done that in the past.
No.
It's just, as I said, it's that pressure to play him so deep because he's the only one with experience there. And as I said, he would be putting in raw players on hard defenders. I think it's just what you got to do at this point.
Yeah, we don't have
Maybe I'm wrong. Again, I'm not a coach, but
the highest amount of options.
Yeah.
from what you look at our VFL list at the moment, like most of our players that are actually standing out are all of our young midfield players. Like,
yeah,
we don't really have any forwards kind of presenting themselves as the next best thing.
yeah,
But yeah,
um,
live and learn.
yeah, yeah. As I said, I will switch it up a bit. Talking about getting a bit more opportunity. Player I want to highlight, who's in my spotlights because I don't know how the AFL match report didn't put him in there. Willem Drew, absolutely
I did
fantastic.
see a note about him. I thought he had a really good game.
Honestly, he was just because he's been sort of pushed out with Jason Horn-Francis. He's just like the hard nut you can put in. Maybe if Wines is on the bench, put him in for a few. But yeah, he took a lot of centre bounces, and honestly, his grunt work, his tackling is really good. Score involvement's fantastic, and yeah, kicked a goal off his own boot. And yeah, as I said, he was just at times where I thought, yeah, because Ollie Wines, he had enough of it, but there was definitely some, mediocre possessions. Wasn't quite all that there, despite being what was a fairly good game. Yeah, as I said, I just saw what Willem Drew was able to do alongside Butters was just so much offense generated. And that's just the tell for Port. They're going to generate offense during the season. Obviously, there's a bit of a question on goal kicking. 18-14's a bit
That's still kind of the
because
same just across the entire league, though.
there's a bit, but as I said, it's just the way Port play. They will always take that wide option, even if sometimes it feels detrimental, just because they think they can press up, which they do. Don't get me wrong. But it also means if they are struggling to score, because they press up so much, as I said, it's just that times, and Shai Bolton proved it. He always does it against us. Just so fast out the back. He doesn't have overly too many disposals. Probably really good this game, comparatively for a Bolton game.
I was going to mention that I thought he had a much better game than he did last week.
Yeah, as I said, I think the thing about Bolton is he's just not always as present. But this one, as I said, not only did he get the ball, he was just so damaging with it, Again, like with a lot of dump kickers, a few clangers here and there, but yeah, fantastic otherwise. So yeah, I guess that's most of the things I have to say about that.
I don't think there really is much more we need to cover on that.
Yeah, I'll do the limelight players. Obviously, I mentioned Butters, Zerk Thatcher.
I thought, he had a great game.
Well, dominated Lynch. Farrell, again, so good with its ball use. Marshall, who you mentioned, up forward. Bolton, Bacon, Nank. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one with the old head-to-head, two
Nank and
players that
Soldo.
probably used to, playing against each other. I
Funny
think Nank just dominated a
funny
bit
thing
more
I
of the
spotted
pure
about
hitouts.
Nank and Soldo is that Nank got a fine against Soldo.
Did he?
Yeah,
I
it was
didn't
it was a
notice
bit
that.
bit rough with him, but
Yeah, rough, eh? Between mates, you need to lower that fine. If you're mates, you pay half the fine. That's what I
yeah, I
think.
agree. I think Soldo should pay his half and make it all fair and square.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think Nankervis had the overall better game. But I think what's so damaging about Soldo is just he's really good at percent hits
Yeah,
to the midfield, and that's what Port were missing. Uh, as I said, he's very accurate with
he's a
his
he's a
hits.
brilliant tap rockman.
Yeah, won't win every ruck, and clearly, I mean, he did technically win the amount of hitouts over Nankervis, but I think Nankervis was just a bit more
The thing that I've always
around
seen
the ground as
with
well.
like Nank is better around the ground, like he
Yeah,
especially when he dips backwards into the back line, whereas
yeah,
Soldo will always push more forward because he's a more tall marking
yeah.
like he's a marking ruck.
And I think that's like Nankervis's evolution because it used to be a bit ironic. Like Nank the Tank, he wasn't actually the most fittest ruck going around early in his career, but he's developed that so much. Credit to him. Um, and it'll be great for Richmond to come. As I said, his captain, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, I think probably if I was to guess, he would also have a brilliant training standard because, as I said, just his ability to keep at the contest all day is pretty great.
Yeah, no, I agree. I did touch on some injuries, but I'll briefly mention them again. Morris Riley Jr. pulled out very, very late due to
Yeah,
back
before the
soreness,
game.
which is why McKelty Lafau was able to debut in the starting 22, and we moved Judson Clark into our sub role. Tim Taranto went off late with an ankle injury. I don't know if he'll play next week, which isn't great considering we kind of need both him and Hopper in the team.
Yeah.
And then Lockie Jones got a corky. He should be, and it'll be 50-50 of whether he'll play this week.
Yeah, it is a bit. I think it was a bit precautionary as well because I think it's just you have the like for like player in Dill Williams.
Yeah.
Dill Williams obviously a bit of a cleaner user of the ball. Lockie a bit more scrap, but both off halfback. So I think it's just one of those things where, yeah, as you say, it's a bit 50-50. You wouldn't be surprised if he misses, but I don't think it's a huge calf.
No, I think.
Oh, actually, no, it is a huge calf
Oh.
if you look at it. It's massive, but
Yeah,
it's not a huge injury.
No. He'll be back within probably 2, maybe 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And also, I forgot, I didn't get my spotlight players. Drew, again, I mentioned him earlier.
yes, you did.
Dusty Burn-Jones, best forward performance I've seen from him since the switch up forward. Great pressure, but just good ball use. Converted 2 goals. One of them was a bit of a lucky soccer off the ground.
Yes, it was. I remember it well.
Yeah, I can imagine. And for Richmond, I thought Trezise played really solidly. It's pretty, a lot of
For a young
ball
player
went
that
through him.
came out of the VFL,
Yeah.
I thought he's been able to actually show his craft really well at AFL level. He just needs more game time.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as I said, I thought, when he had the ball in his hands, he was, just generally doing the good thing. Did fairly well one-on-one. No, I just liked him. And who else did I get? Oh, yeah, Rioli.
Always.
By far, again, brilliant forward movement. Played a bit more around the ground too that week. Wasn't just off the
he
half
pushed up a lot.
forward.
He pushed up a lot more.
Yeah,
It's very good to
I
see.
guess Richmond are probably going to do that a bit more during the season with their forward line struggles. If they can see if they can get a few more goals out of Daniel Rioli, try and help that out as much as you can.
Well, he might
it's what
be,
you got to do.
He might be playing the Bashahuli role now, but he is a premiership forward.
Yeah,
Triple premiership
very
forward.
technically.
Okay, before we move on to just games to look out for in round 3 and our brief opinions on them, I want to touch on MRO and the Rising Star.
Mm-hmm.
So we already talked about Peter Wright. We had a big discussion about that briefly.
Yeah.
Max King were out for 1 match for rough conduct with Finlay McRae. There's probably not all that much in it, but one match is one match.
Whether he gets let off. I'd actually suspect he gets let off, but that's just
might just get downgraded to a fine. Honestly, who knows?
Yeah.
And then the Rising Star nomination went to someone who actually got it last season, Mr. George Wardlaw from the North Melbourne Kangaroos. Which,
Yeah,
I think he had a pretty good game. Like the
fantastic.
the North Young Guns,
It was,
despite
yeah,
despite a loss to Freo, are really showing up, especially him and Sheasel. Like,
yeah. And it's just like their midfield's so damaging. Like that's set. There's no doubt about that.
yeah, like
They've got,
you can't really like diss them all that much.
yeah, like, and they're winning the clearances in terms of opposition. Like they're positive in that stat. And considering you have a young ruckman, Tristan Sherry, that's
Hmm.
probably good signs. And as I said, it's just the work rate as well. They're always tackling, running both ways, and yeah, Wardlaw deserves it. And yeah, as I said, if he's as much as the promise he showed last year, and I thought last year he showed a fair bit. I was surprised he played under 10 games, but apparently it was only 8. And looking forward to seeing a lot more of him this year.
Yeah, I agree. All right, now let's talk about games to look out for in round 3. Well, I think the biggest one is going to be
Yeah,
the opening game of round 3, Brisbane and
yeah.
Collingwood.
Do we call it a spoon bowl?
I I want it to be a draw so badly.
Oh, like honestly, these teams will recover. Probably. Brisbane,
Probably.
I have a lot more faith in than Collingwood at the moment.
Yeah, I agree.
So this match needs to have some really memey bullcrap in it because, yeah, as I said, one of these teams will annoyingly come back, and yeah, it's just weird.
The interesting thing about it though is that Brisbane are coming off of a bye.
Yeah, and it's like, well, do you want the bye? Like as I said, it's early, but like if there's any team that needs that early bye,
It
it would
probably
be
was
Brisbane.
Brisbane.
So, but I don't know if it was even work rate though. Like, they didn't look tired. Like, I mean, the Carlton game, stats wise, they should have won.
No, I agree.
Like that's just aberration. Say it's like, well, Freo, they were very beaten comprehensively, but at the same time, they had that one loss against Port last year where they had that and just looked fine ever since. So who knows really? But at the end of the day, Collingwood are travelling to Brisbane in Queensland. Queensland afternoon, so it's probably going to be humid.
It's going to be humid as hell
with a struggling forward line. It's just, I don't think it looks good for him. I'm probably fairly confident they're going 0-4, and at that point you pencil through a top 4 point, and not many teams go to top 4 starting 0-4. I don't know if there has been a team in history, but
not off the top of my head.
So, because I know Sydney were close, but yeah, I think they got like 5th after like a 1-5 start or something.
Would have been
a few years like
it was
that.
several years
ago. 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a must-win game for Collingwood, but I don't see it happening.
It's a must-win game for both of them, really. But Brisbane are probably going to be more favourites.
Brisbane by 15, I reckon. Like, I don't think it'll be that high scoring. If it is high scoring, I feel like Collingwood's going to get obliterated. Like, if you gave me a range, I think there's a lot more simulations where Brisbane just thrash Collingwood.
Yeah.
Although I can see them playing both badly. Who knows?
All right,
it's just awkward.
Yeah. Let's go to the other team that just had a bye. North and Carlton. I think Carlton pretty convincing. I think they'll probably be a pretty convincing win. They are the better team overall. But I think North could play them close if they're a lot more consistent.
That's the thing. It's like, again, it's such a weird thing when North, they're coming up against great midfields at the moment.
Yeah, their run is just not great.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, coming up against, they had GWS with their tall forward line. And yeah, as I said, they faced Fremantle, who weirdly enough had their forward line come together, and now they're up against dual Coleman threat. It's just bad optics for them.
Yeah.
Again,
all you can really ask for is just for them to try their best, get that experience into their young players, learn from it. then it's not much more you can
I
do.
got Carlton by 23. I think what will happen is probably similar to the Freo game. They'll just get blitzed at a point. They'll keep on trying,
Mhm.
and it'll be a bit harder for Carlton to like really put on the throat. But I don't see them having as much issues. I don't see them jumping Carlton like they did Fremantle. But you know, who knows?
Yeah, you never know.
They're plucky.
Freo and Adelaide over at
Yeah,
Optus.
it's I mean, it's one of those things where there's still part of you saying, "Oh, Adelaide was so good last year," you know. Freo, still don't quite believe in them, but
But the results don't lie at
like,
the moment.
yeah, I think the biggest optimism for Adelaide is Freo's half back line. They're very battered at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
so as I said, their midfield maybe, as I said, could maybe generate a bit more, get a bit more quality entries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so yeah, like I think it's just consistency for Freo. Like I think Adelaide's got the potential to score fast against them, and I don't think they're so far off the pace as their 0-2 record says. But at the same time, I've got like not much faith in them from what I've seen. Freo by 10. It's just yeah. I
It's
really
one of the
hope
two
Freo
games
can
of this week,
hold up in prime time.
or maybe one
Yeah.
of the three games of this week that are like pretty much a coin flip kind of game. Because you don't know what kind of
Yeah,
Adelaide's going to show up, and you don't know what kind of Freo is going to show up.
exactly. As I said, both teams are just not being consistent. It's just one team's 2-0 and one team's 0-2, And yeah, and it's not like Fremantle even haven't had that big scalp. They beat Brisbane. Like, I don't care that they, obviously coming back from that margin, that was still quality.
Mm-hmm.
And North were playing good football. I don't think that was a free win. So yeah, it's just we'll wait and see. But yeah, so you got to give it a Freo.
All right, the second of the three coin flip games, Essendon and St Kilda at Marvel Stadium.
It's a bit of opposites attract, isn't it?
Yeah, it
Like
really is. They
you
both play
got,
different styles of
yeah,
AFL, but it's just they're
it's
really
just
interesting
like
clash.
yeah. And if you take the slightly negative, it's Essendon without a back line and versus St Kilda with a struggling forward line.
Especially if they're not going to
But
have Max King out there.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, well, is Essendon's hard nut approach to this season going to match up well against St Kilda's out the back fast ball movement, especially if St Kilda can get a few turnovers, which I think they will.
Yeah.
Like I said, Essendon's forward line isn't that great. They can just generate score from a variety of players. They're really relying on that small fleet to, as I said, without 2 meter Peter, they just need to find a way to bring the ball to ground.
Mm-hmm.
If so, I give them a chance. I think they might struggle. I got the Saints by 18, but I honestly think it's pretty close. It's just, yeah, I don't know. I think 18, maybe 8. I don't know why I said so high, but I think there's definitely not too much between the teams. It's just, both teams have problems, but both teams, a bit of optimism to them.
Yeah, I agree. I might actually be at that game. I don't know just yet.
Ooh.
So
Yeah.
I could let you know from live in stadium reporting how that goes.
Yeah.
The third of the coin
sure.
flip games, Port and Melbourne at the Adelaide Oval.
Yeah. It's like Port with a theoretically good attack versus Melbourne. Oh, sorry. Port with a theoretically good attack that are a bit iffy, and Melbourne with a theoretically bad backline that are just still being terrific. I'd say Melbourne, just few injuries, like obviously the quality of their players.
Yeah, and they've just lost both Jake Lever and Stephen May.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's just honestly, I think you're just going to see a lot of centre clearance goals. Like both teams can really generate from them. I think Port probably have the more consistent midfield. Melbourne obviously have a bit more damage from what they can do, especially, as I said, Gawn, I think, is one of those ruckmen that will really test out Soldo.
Mm-hmm.
as I said, it's going to be hard to get taps to advantage when it's just in and out, hard body running in.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know. It's a coin flip game. It's not really too much I can say. They've had a few close contests. Port's gotten over the line in most of them in recent time. I'll say Port by 7. I'm not really sure if I can really say that's bias or not, but
I mean, when it's a close margin, it probably isn't all that much bias, but
yeah,
it's just faith, really.
yeah, I guess, which
Um,
I have mild amounts of.
Doggies and the Eagles.
Yep.
First game on the Sunday. It's probably going to be the Doggies.
Oh, I didn't even write notes on it. I just realized.
No, I have no notes on these
I
games. I'm kind of just going through them one by one.
Oh, I wrote like a sentence each, but yeah, no, it's West Coast who suck in the middle versus Clearance Kings. Oh man,
Yeah,
not good optic.
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
the odds are in their favor. There's not much more you can really say. You just gotta hope that the experience will actually help out the younger Eagle players. Hope that the veterans have some sort of impact, but there's
exactly, and it's just
probably just gonna be the
I think it's just converting their moments because I don't think anything's going to magically happen to West Coast midfield. They're just going to be down all year just because of the players. I got a few players back that will maybe show some slight improvement, but it's not going to be, as I said, it might be like having 50 disposals less compared to 30, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
yeah, it's just West Coast just need to make the most of their chances to, build consistency for the matches that they're going to be closer in, which, yeah, as I said, they're going to be waiting a while. It's a very tough opening draw, but yeah, our Bulldogs by a random high number.
Yeah, I think it might be a blowout, but you got to hope that there might be some sort of saving grace.
Especially away. Ugh.
Yeah, it's a marvel of all places.
Yeah.
Well, that's because the MCG is taken because Richmond and Sydney are playing there next.
Yeah. So mean. Should
Well, I'm not expecting a win. I wasn't expecting a win this last week. I was expecting a win the week before. But I just want to see more experience, more quality gameplay from our younger players, and
and
let them have that growth. Because Sydney is just too good at the moment.
Yeah, the way that Richmond are defending, Sydney will get some deeper entries. They've just been too good for it. But they might be able to stop. I reckon Richmond have a chance of keeping Sydney under 100. That's my prediction.
Especially if we're getting Broad and Young back. We get two important members of our backline back.
Honestly, I just think, with the way the two teams match up, it should be scrappy. I really think that Richmond have a chance to be fairly even-ish in some aspects of it. But, I mean, Sydney forward line is just so much better than Richmond's. It's hard not to see them, when in a scrapping game, normally it's just moments and conversion, and it's just so hard to see that not being in Sydney's favour.
And their midfield is just bigger and stronger than ours. Well, at least right now, especially when we don't have... especially we don't have Taranto and Hopper in there.
It's just, I mean, I'd like to think that Richmond have shown enough that they're not going to be too outclassed by it, but I also said Sydney by 25, so... Yeah,
I'm expecting most people to go Sydney. And the last one, the Easter Monday traditional clash against Hawthorn and Geelong.
I mean, there have been some Hawthorn upsets at times.
I don't think this one will be one of them.
No. I will say Hawthorn attacking wide might be better than the way Adelaide did it. And I think Geelong, you probably actually can get away with chipping a bit more. But, Sorry if any Hawthorn fans are listening, but it's just...
It's not an appealing match to even watch.
No, and as I said, it's just identity. They had a bad week last week. You say, hey, forget about it. They're up against tough opposition, but we're going to show, some sort of Hawthorn brand of movement. Maybe it's going to be pace, a few teams have gotten Geelong over the back. Hawthorn definitely have the players for it.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully Sam Mitchell might say to a few players like, Weddle, hey, you get the ball on the ring, run fast, run for your life,
Mm-hmm.
and, expose some of their younger players, like I said, Ocean Mullen, and, Holmes, who's been a bit up and down to start the season. I think he had a good first game, but a bit missing at times against Adelaide. Yeah.
Well,
Just, yeah.
yeah, there's
I
not
don't know,
much
maybe it's a bit optimistic.
more you can really say. He's
Yeah.
gotta hope that they show something.
Yeah, I hope they do too. It's always terrible when your team sucks and you get a marquee game.
Yeah.
Um, it's just, but as I said, you're a young team. You just hope for any sort of optimism. As I said, it's yeah. Unfortunately, Hawthorn's just a bit where I thought they would be at the start of the year, with just a bit of a lack of identity and a lack of defense.
Hopefully, as the season goes on, they might start to show some promise, but we can't guarantee
Yeah,
that
it's a
at the
back
moment.
half. As I said, like at the start of the season where the game's not as congested as much, you can get a bit more free flowing attack. It's not going to favor Hawthorn, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe they'll get a few more at the end of the year when them controlling might actually benefit them, and them scores tend to be a bit higher at the start of the season. As I said, we've seen now with defenses the way they are. Every team's just giving up a few, but maybe when the game gets a bit muddier, Hawthorn might be a bit better. Right now, I don't think it's the case.
Nah, but who knows?
Yeah.
And then the Suns and the Giants both had buys this week. I think it's come at a really
Yes.
good time, especially for the Suns. They'll
Oh,
give them
especially
time.
Giants, they need to regroup.
Yeah,
Heaps.
give them enough time to learn from their defeat against the Doggies. The Giants,
Yeah.
honestly, I don't think they really needed it. But they can put their feet up for a bit.
I mean, yeah, like I don't know. It's one of the things where you don't want to get too ahead of themselves, but they're just being so good. And yeah, they should be very content with what they've done this year
Who are they?
so far.
I know we'll touch on it next week, but who are they playing next week?
Mm,
They're playing each other. Well, there you go.
there you go.
They're playing each other in Gather Round.
In Gather Round. Isn't that nice?
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I guess it kind of ties everything up into a neat little bow, except for one thing, which I have to ask, as I do every week. What are you up to?
I've actually got like a lot of free time. As I said, I'm waiting in between things. Spent a lot of last week doing a few things for friends, a bit of content creation.
As I've seen,
for a few friends at stream.
very fun things.
Yeah, I've gone a bit insane with it. And also I've been watching clips of the Cats musical from 1992 or whatever, whenever it was, which you think has no relevance, but absolutely ruined my viewing experience of the Cats and Adelaide game. Because throughout the game, I was just like, if Cats were like the different character of Cats, which ones would they be? And it was just like my mind was focusing on that, and I'm like, I gotta be taking notes.
I have a podcast to
serious
work on.
Review, exactly. No one cares that I think that Tom Hawkins is Buster for Jones, which he is, by the way. But like zero, like we might get 5 viewers a week at this point, and absolutely zero of them.
Every number
care.
counts.
I mean, yeah, well, we're thankful for our viewers, but
we're very
just keep in
mind
that, yeah, I do realize that cat-based AFL podcast content is definitely a bit too niche for me to be putting in there.
No,
so yeah,
I'm definitely going to put you far away from that idea.
Look, maybe I'll put it on TikTok. Like they have those cheer charts. Maybe I'll do one of them.
It's true, they do.
And send it to send it to Blaze. He'll put my trash content up.
Sure. All right. This week for me, more of the same. Working. It's only a 4-day working week this week. Same with next week, so I'm very happy for that. Thank you, long weekend.
Yeah.
I might be helping some friends with their move. Thursday/Friday, which I'm fine with. Like that'll be the Thursday part will be after work, which is no issue for me. Again, Saturday I might be going to the Essendon St Kilda game. Sunday I might be going to Richmond Sydney. I don't entirely know just yet. Depends on plans of other people. And then just gonna enjoy my time off. Watch some footy.
Yeah, awesome.
So I don't think there's anything else I need to make a note of. Let me just double check my notes. I think we went through everything.
Yeah, I think that was pretty common. There's not many big news things. It was just
no,
a lot.
Yeah, it was mostly just Peter Wright was kind
Yeah,
of the big thing of the week.
I said unfortunately, it said start of the season is just injuries really.
Yeah.
Always sucks, but just happens early in seasons.
So
Players are a bit raw.
In that case, I think we shall wind it down here. Thank you all so much for listening and watching and following our socials, and hopefully, give us some more stuff to talk about apart from the usual stuff we talk about each week. Like throw us a random topic, AFL related, and we'll give our opinions on it. Just send them down to our socials down below, or you can slide into my DMs. I'm pretty sure they're open across
just
all
message
accounts.
us. Like, if you ever want to message us and you're like respectful, just go ahead.
If you know us personally, feel free to bug us anytime. Like, we will take that and run with it.
Or you just want to send the cool things across.
Yeah.
If you got stats, send us stats.
Oh yeah, we love stats.
Yeah.
I like the more direct stats. You like the indirect stats.
Yeah, I like diving in there.
I think
just going in.
We have our niches.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. We're looking forward to round 3. I hope you all are too. And we will see you all next Wednesday at 10 a.m. because that's when these go live for episode 6 of the Coast to Coast AFL podcast. So tune in then, and we'll see you there. Goodbye.